Sports minds, people focused. This is the first true episode of The Arena in the Boardroom. And if you are coming to us from our introductory episode, welcome. Glad you wanted to spend a little bit more time with us. And if this is your first episode, welcome. We are going to be covering a pretty good topic today as we are going to talk a little bit about HR, human resources. The sports aspects here are going to definitely be fewer, but this is a really important topic to cover as not only is HR a rapidly growing field, but it's rapidly growing because the human capital within it is rapidly evolving. So there is a need for human resources. Full disclosure, my allergies did choose violence today, so I'm going to try to keep the sniffing and any sneezing at a minimum, but I can make no guarantees on that. I'm Brandon, your host for this episode, so I want to, before we get started, introduce the format you can expect to hear from me anytime you choose to listen to my voice. We're here in the introduction where I'm going to outline the topic of the day. I'll move into sharing perspective from three levels of engagement: personal, the employee, and the company or organization, as I've lived in all three stages as a professional, and then move in to cover the topical points of what I hope that you're going to be able to get the most out of by listening to this episode. Pretty easy, pretty smooth. And each time we're going to have a little twist because I will have a drink that I will be highlighting and consuming each episode because we're all adults, right? And sometimes it is necessary. Today's drink is a classic, a Tom Collins. The recipe is in the description. We are ready to roll. So, human resources. What is HR? It's shrouded in mystery to many, right? We are the faceless group that in simplest terms manages the human capital or the personnel within an organization behind the scenes. That's going to look very different depending on the organization that we are talking about or the organization that you're in. No HR department is going to look the same in separate entities. From the personal perspective, my experience with human resources has honestly been up and down. Until now, where I'm currently working in HR, I've never really worked with or in a functional HR department. So as someone who is pursuing a doctorate in the subject, where I'm at now is ideal in so many ways. I get to learn, experience, and truly understand how HR should look. And this is hands down the best experience I've ever seen, had, or experienced in any way. And I'm thankful for it. Again, this is ideal as somebody who is studying the topic. So coming from my previous job, that was not the case. In fact, it was a dumpster fire, and that might be generous given how I get to see the environment I'm currently in function. You're going to hear me say this a lot during this episode. It matters. Where I'm at now, our HR department is easily 40 people deep. And if you've got a look of shock on your face, that's the same look that everybody has when I tell them that, because this is far from the norm. HR is usually need-based, but the need is often underestimated and undervalued, much to the detriment of everybody, and that can include the company as well. As an employee, HR is important as they should be responsible for the acquisition and onboarding. But once you begin working for a company, if you don't have a union present, they are your protection. And I say that loosely, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But you as an employee, you do have protected rights. And it's HR's job to make sure that those rights are not infringed upon. Now, an employee being summoned to HR oftentimes has a negative connotation to it. But the reality is there are many functions in HR that are very useful to an employee. If you look at my role in particular, I handle work comp, employee leave such as FMLA, and I do some ADA as well. I can, if somebody needs it, walk them through the process of needing protected time away to make sure that they understand really what they're eligible for, how it applies to them, and what protections they have. I don't consider myself scary, and I think it's a good thing that the organization I'm in dedicates a single person to handle this function because we do get a decent amount of inquiries, and they know that I'm the one that they need to go to, and they also know that I'm the one that needs to deliver the goods to make sure that they're able to get what they need. Now, I'm one function included in HR. There's payroll, there's benefits, training, all lumped into these areas as well. So as an employee, an accessible HR department is probably one of the best assets you can have if you're going to be working there, short or long term. Now for the company, HR is their entity. We exist to keep the company out of jeopardy as a set of checks and balances to make sure that people are really following the rules and that other really intricate details don't fall through the cracks. Fast evolving companies and organizations are realizing that our only function isn't just making sure that the HR department keeps the company out of jeopardy, right? That's where the negative idea of HR comes from. People think that we work simply just on behalf of the company. But just like the employees, we do have a job and we are employed by the company. We do get directives. Sometimes those directives can be company driven and go in contest of what we know should be done or want done based on our expertise, but that is the reality, and it is a balance. A good HR department will be in the middle of some very difficult situations where they have to resolve a conflict that could jeopardize both an employee and the company as well. So I have a question for you. Friend or foe, what is HR? If you've made your decision on that, hold tight because there's a little bit more we're going to go over. The experience you have in an organization is going to be heavily dependent on the type of HR department you're subjected to. This is going to be a future episode, but when we talk unions, you're going to find out that I'm very pro-union, and I don't think that any organization should just have human resources managing the human capital, given that we do work for the company. What a union presence creates is accountability, and I'll toss a little bit of sports in here, but unions and pro sports, they collectively bargain their working terms, much like every union does and should do. When you look at it in athletics, they hammer out not just the working terms, percentages of pay, and a bunch of other rights deals that make sure that the athletes are protected. Every so often, you'll see a collective bargaining agreement expire, and they go on strike. And a strike in sports is viewed as this dramatic thing. Any strike is, and the drama behind strikes is a bit overblown because most of the people are not in unions that are looking at them from the outside in, and people just don't know a whole lot about them. But know that a strike is a necessary component to create an equitable environment where both sides are able to achieve their goals. An organization will get to continue to function, and human capital gets to work under proper working conditions. And that is really what a union does. Now, I'll include some additional resources at the end of this to look at, not just some of the articles and stuff that I've been using for my research, but there's another podcast that I would love for you all to check out if you're interested in more of the legal side of HR. There's some great information, and there's a lot of people providing it. And remember, you as an employee have rights. It is in your best interest to know what those are. All right, moving ahead. HR functions. We covered a few of them, but we're going to go in a little bit more. While I hate the term talent acquisition, I will save that rant for another episode. I will say that talent acquisition folks in HR departments, they should be the ones creating those job requisitions, screening candidates, and ultimately doing the introductory onboarding for a new employee, which can be the offer letter, the I-9 documents, and anything else that's required to make sure that you as a staff can get started nice and easy and then get training with your supervisor. On top of that, you've also got compensation and benefits. We all like money. This is an HR function just beyond paying employees, though. We make sure that time cards are coded correctly, submitted on time, and of course, managing the benefits package that may exist within an organization that is available to an employee. We've got risk management, and you could lump me into this, making sure that people are given appropriate time to recover from a procedure or illness, and making sure that when they do return back, they're able to return back safely and perform all of their job functions with or without accommodation. Risk is broad, but it factors into making sure that the company is providing a safe environment and that the employee gets what they need provided to them. If you've heard of OSHA, this would fall under that umbrella as well. We've got labor law and accommodations. Remember, employees, you have rights, and our job in HR is to understand these laws and make sure that supervisors do as well, so that none of the employees can come back and say that they felt they were being treated unfairly or worse, abused, right? A good HR team will do regular check-ins depending on their function just to ensure that everything is going smooth from their vantage point. A general role that you might see is a clerical role in HR that really functions as a point person that might be able to help route individuals to where they need to go. From the employee level, someone who just might be part-time or works a few hours here and there, they might not know how HR functions within that organization or how HR functions at all. And a clerical or administrative person can act as a front desk or as an easy bridge to get that employee to where they need to get to on a smooth timeline with a seamless level of communication. If you're listening to this and you're in HR and I left you roll out, I'm sorry. There's plenty more roles we could include: DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, performance management, strategic planning, employee well-being, culture, I could go on. It all falls under that HR umbrella. And again, it matters. If you have the opportunity to interview somewhere, ask them about their HR structure. If you start to get a dodgy answer or they seem put off that you would have the nerve as an applicant to ask about HR, consider it a red flag, because a company that prides itself on taking care of the people that work within it are not going to hesitate to brag that they've got a robust HR department. Much like the place that I'm at now, that was one of the selling points that they had, was depth, and that you really get to focus on the individual role you have and tend to the issues that the people might have relating to your function. So on functions, in hearing some of those tasks, my question to you, if you're listening, is, are you currently working somewhere in a position that is not in HR, but doing any of the tasks above? I'd be a little bit surprised if you say no, but if you did say no, I'm very happy for you, because you're probably in a well-run organization, at least on paper. If you said yes, I have a few follow-up questions for you. Talent acquisition, in my opinion, is the hardest part of running a team, because when you think about prospective employees, we're told it has to look a certain way. Again, that's a different episode, but I'll say this. People suck at hiring. And as a manager, while I felt like I was good at hiring, I would have loved help doing it, but mainly from the sourcing side. Float me people that pass your initial screening, and I can go from there to build my team. But if you are in day-to-day operations and you also have to focus on personnel, that is not always a recipe for success. Sports reference here, I'm going to sneak one in. Similar to a coach who's also the GM of your team, it's just too many hats. Following that, are you also doing the onboarding paperwork? Now, I've got a little bit more of a problem with this than if you're responsible for your talent acquisition, because this can get dicey because you just might not know how to. When it comes to onboarding documents, some of them can be time sensitive. If there's background checks, the I-9 paperwork needs to be submitted in a timely manner. And honestly, as a manager, once you've hired somebody, you just want that person to start working. You don't have time to deal with all the paperwork and make sure that this is filled out and this filled out. You hired somebody because you have an immediate need to get somebody on your team so that you can probably stop filling in the gaps and taking away from the tasks that you want to do. And that's really how it happens. I mean, you hire somebody, if you're responsible for all the onboarding paperwork, somebody calls off, you might have had every great intention to get it filled out on that day until you're stuck working a 9-11-hour shift because somebody didn't come into work that day. So if you're responsible for that, not exactly an ideal position. Hopefully, nobody outside of HR is responsible for compensation outside of submitting time cards, although I will say at my last stop, there were more than a few times I had to do corrections. Again, place was a dumpster fire. And certainly, nobody outside of HR should be playing any role in benefits administration. At the very most, you can give advice and say which plan was good for you based off of similarities. But if you're having to give benefits counseling and you're not in HR, that is a major problem. Risk and law, I mean, your job is to work in a safe environment, not provide it. As for the laws, be knowledgeable, but you as a manager, as an employee, it's not your job to keep the company out of legal jeopardy. It's your job to do your job to the best of your abilities in an environment that allows you to do so. Alrighty, where so far are you on this list? The most likely of the bunch is that you might be responsible for securing your own talent, which really is more of a nuisance than anything, just because interviews and scheduling them can be time consuming. You probably have other stuff you generally need to do. I get it. I've been there. But if you're onboarding, beyond training, submitting documents, creating those offer letters, are you poking around your HRIS system doing audits on behalf of your staff? If you're doing any of those things, congratulations, you're passively working in HR and doing our job for us. Whether it's because they're incompetent or because that department's not prioritized, either way, it's a bit of a problem, because if something were to happen, you can assume that you're probably not going to be well protected. And that is a very broad and open-ended statement that I'm going to leave right there. So in saying that, good and bad HR, I'm going to give a couple of examples of both, but we're going to start with the bad. Beware of the HR generalist, both as a prospective employee and if you're looking for a role as well in HR. That designation means you're going to get paid trash to do a bunch of functions that they don't want to pay other individuals to do. As an employee, if you're working with a generalist on something important, there's a chance they might not know what they're talking about or give you low quality information. Again, this is a broad generalization as I talk about the HR generalist. But I do say that there should be some caution. These generalists, they are a major risk and a red flag because they don't have a specific function beyond just working in HR. Again, the generalist role means you're going to be given a bunch of general tasks. You're expected to know broadly how to do them without specializing in any specific one, even if you've got a specialty. That generalist, they could help you. They also could not. All right. So just caution if you see yourself working with a ton of HR generalists within your organization, or if you're applying for a job. I don't know if an HR generalist role is always going to be the right one for anybody. The second thing, beware of external HR companies as well. I understand if the company is very small, but think about it. HR manages human capital. My role in particular, anyone can reach me. My name is on the employee website for them to find if they need something pertaining to my role. I get to build relationships with people, and I get to build that rapport and develop some semblance of reliability. Not that external HR companies are worthless, but if you work in a place that has a large amount of human capital and they're choosing not to actively manage it, that is a major red flag. All right. Now for some good. I feel like I've been a little pessimistic, but I want to share some positive things as well, right? HR is a resource. We are not to be feared. We're to be used. You want HR to exist because they can help you through some very difficult elements of your job, both professionally and personally. We're supposed to be a confidential entity as well, which means if you disclose something to us that you're concerned about, we can act appropriately without putting you in jeopardy. HR should be able to mediate conflict and do things along those lines while protecting the employee in the process. We're also there to do the stuff you shouldn't need to do. If you're an employee, you don't have to worry about doing anything except your job. If you are, that's a problem. As a manager, we're here to support you and make sure you've got the right pieces to support you to do your job and manage those under you so that you can support them in the right way. As a company, we're here to make sure you don't do anything stupid that gets all of us fired or sued. We are necessary. So I say that invest in HR. It matters. I'm going to leave you with one last piece, and this is something that when I was going through my interview process, I really started to notice, and something that I've embodied, and I've tried to tell people the same thing as they go through their job search as well. HR is an indicator of the company's health. What does that mean? Now, have you ever just walked into a place and it just feels chaotic? Have you had a truly negative experience working somewhere where everybody's just jumping at the chance to leave that job? Remember, there's always a reason for negative behavior and feelings, and that's because there's often a disconnect between the site level and the upper levels of communication. Oftentimes, that is going to rest on HR in some way. Now, no employee or organization is going to be perfect. That's a really unfair bar, and not everything will be handled in a way where everyone walks away clean. Again, a good HR department is going to be in some very difficult situations, juggling the company's benefit and the employee's benefit, and trying to come up with a way that makes it so that both sides get an amicable resolution. They say that a good negotiation means both sides got screwed a little bit, and honestly, that's HR's role. It's not going to be perfect. But again, we are an asset, and if you use us appropriately, we can be one of the best things you have in your corner. Now's a good time. I'm going to throw in a sports reference. But think about your favorite team, any sport. Think about how stable they are. Are players developing? Are they winning consistently? Are they changing coaches every few years? A good HR department for you as an employee can be the difference between sustainable and stable, or unstable and losing a chunk of time that you might not be able to recover from, and it could taint your experience, not just at a company, but perhaps on a career field, right? You might end up doing something completely different because of a negative experience. So I will ask again, HR, friend or foe? I will let you decide that, but pay attention to everything. Ask questions and make sure you are getting into the right situation that will support you, the person, and the employee that is going to be an asset to that organization. All right, we're going to close this thing out. Check out the resources I have included in the post as well. If you want the drink recipe, again, it is in the description and in the post. And yeah, that's a wrap. Right, we'll be back again with another topic in the coming days or week. I'm going to try to be pretty regular with this, and we're going to range really in that 20 to 30, maybe 35-minute range. Try to get you in and out relatively quick, get you the information that you need. All right, I'm out. Made it. No sneezing, no sniffling. I think we're good to go. I'm going to take care of these allergies. Thank you for listening.